Joe is a friend of mine. I met him through the American Legion. He is a member of Apple Valley Post 1776 here in the Department of Minnesota. What you don't know about Joe is he's an infantry sergeant. He has served our United States Armed Forces in a volunteer capacity as what you call 11 Bravo for us Army people, and he was in the infantry. He was kind enough to sit down with me for a little bit and talk about infantry in the Army as well as how it has impacted his faith. And so I hope you will join me as we have a conversation with Joe Tappainer. So the Infantry Corps is the oldest corps in the United States of America. George Washington created it. It was the first thing that he created when he was given carte blanche to build a military. And we're going to talk about the role of the infantry, maybe. Who are those individuals that serve in our United States Armed Forces as an infantry sergeant? And we are fortunate to have with us today Joe Tappainer, and he was a staff sergeant in the United States Army. He was an infantry guy. And so thanks for joining us today, Joe. First off, how did you decide to become an infantry?
Yeah, that surprised my parents too, but
Hmm.
my father was infantry,
Okay.
so I just followed him.
Okay. Did you know anything about what infantry meant?
No, when I first signed up for it, all I knew is that they walked a lot.
and that sounded like something you would want to do. And you decided to serve the United States in the military. Was that a decision that came easy for you or not?
Yes, it did, because my family has served in the military in all the branches, all the way back to the Civil War.
It's part of your DNA.
So it's, yeah.
Huh.
My mother has a wall in the house, in her
Uh-huh.
house, that has pictures of everybody from way back when up until today.
So I can only imagine that maybe Christmas time or when you gather together over the holidays, were there stories swapped, or was there, like, did you sit at the knee of your grandpa? Like, what did that look like?
No, stories weren't swapped easily,
Oh,
and they still aren't. Most of that, it's kept hidden.
oh,
You
yeah.
just don't really talk a lot about it. But one of the things that does get you is um, every once in a while, especially when I'm feeling down or like I'm in constant pain because of my back,
Mm,
that doesn't help with depression. It increases it. But you think about it, and it's like nobody knows what you did, and
right,
nobody cares.
right. We want to know about it, but we don't want to know about it.
Right.
But we get to feel the effects of how well you do your job.
Yeah, how well we do our job,
Yeah.
makes it you don't know about it. It's not in the
No.
papers.
Yep.
It's not on TV.
Nope. You're just back there doing your job, and what you're trained to do are things that we know we need in today's world. We are, I think to some degree we get to live in ignorance of the battles that the military engages in, and really to placate us to some degree, we get to have parades. Or I've always heard a lot of the enlisted people can't stand parades. I don't know if you like parades or not, where we get to celebrate you.
Not so much.
Not so, yeah. What would you rather have the American public recognize you? How would you like that?
That's an interesting question because on one hand, you do want people to know and recognize,
Uh-huh.
and on the other hand, you don't want to talk about it.
Right.
You don't. I guess you really don't want them to know. So it's always that struggle.
Between being known and not being known.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of pressure, and I think the technology, we 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 think we're privy to a lot of information, but there's some things that maybe we aren't equipped to appreciate or respect. And the infantry, as well as the Marine Corps and many other positions in the military, have to carry with them quietly. Before we started recording, you were talking about somebody said something that got you thinking.
Yeah, like the Army's 800,000 strong,
Okay.
and the majority of those people are there to support infantry. That's all they do. They support us. I mean, if you think about it, even the combat arms, the artillery, the tankers, they support the infantry.
Now we
I
might be
suppose.
getting. Uh-huh. Go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Well, I was just thinking of all the people that are going to be replying after they hear this, and
Oh,
then
I'm sure.
you
I'm
might have
sure.
started something.
I'm not trying to start anything.
But
Um,
making sure that you're up and ready to do what you have to do.
yes.
Yeah.
Um, I I have friends in all kinds of places, and I talked to a Air Force combat pilot,
Hmm.
fighter pilot,
Yeah.
and I guess they do these days. They don't really have bombers and fighters. They kind of do it all in one.
Okay.
And he said if he had to do what we do, which is see the enemy
Oh.
face to face, he couldn't do his job.
How does someone become infantry? There's training.
Yep.
Are there certain personalities that it's easier? I I mean, how do you take a human being and get them to the point where they can kill another human being?
Um, it's not the people you would think. The big, bulky gym rats,
Uh-huh.
the muscle heads,
Mm.
they don't make it. Um, I guess you would call ranger school to be a infantry ranger
Uh-huh.
is kind of like the college of the infantry, in my opinion. And the guys that are, like I said, the muscle heads, they don't make it because it's not just strength. I mean, it's mental strength.
Okay.
So the scrawny little kid down the street, he's the one that's going to make it because he's strong mentally, because it's all mental.
It's all mental. Is it quick decision making? Is it knowing yourself, understanding the mission? I mean, are those things that go on in your mind when you're in your role?
Yes, and no. The yes part is when I was a specialist, a Spec 4. Um, we were doing some training around a place called Mount Weather, which is where our the president goes, like if there's a nuclear attack.
The President of the United States.
Right. I was
Okay.
with the old guard at that time. I was stationed with the old guard.
Okay.
So we were training out at Mount Weather as if that was really happening. And we had to surround the base and make sure that no one got across. No one
Mm.
crossed the line. And we were all given blanks to fire, and blanks are really dirty.
Oh.
And in my mind, I had decided I was not going to fire my weapon because I didn't want to clean it.
Okay.
But it just so happened,
Uh-huh.
I don't know, 20, 30 minutes later, one guy tried to sneak through the line at my point.
Okay.
And before I even thought about it, I had fired 3 times.
Okay. Was that
So
muscle memory working for you?
it's not just muscle memory. It's I don't know how to explain it.
Protective. You've heard of the wolf personality, the protectors of culture, society.
Yep.
Is that something
That
that
would fit
okay?
that.
Like we always have people that are on the perimeters, allowing us to live our lives in peace, and they're called the wolves. And so, do you find that a lot of infantry people are the wolves of our communities?
Yes, they're also the really good ones are people that won't make it in the peacetime. They're heavy
Oh,
drinkers.
oh,
They're bar brawlers.
oh.
Yeah,
So
but
they need to be.
they're the people that you don't want around you in peacetime because of the way they act are the people that you want around you when you go to war.
It kind of reminds me of all the movies, the action flicks nowadays, kind of epitomize maybe the wolves, the rogues, the rebels,
Yeah,
the socially uncomfortable. They don't fit in, and they're not socially adept
right.
at a dinner party necessarily.
I mean, in the Vietnam era, there were a lot of times it was prison or
Oh,
the
sure.
service,
Yep.
and those were the guys that even the Marines have infantry, and those were the guys that you wouldn't want to have around you unless there was something going on.
Mm. And so fitting in society might not be the best thing to do for somebody that has had to do that type of work on behalf of the United States of America or any country that has a military.
I think so. I don't know if my personality was ingrained in me before I joined the service,
Mm,
but I definitely know now. I'm kind of a stick to myself kind of person. I kind
kind
of
of
like to
quiet.
hover around the periphery and listen and watch.
Kind of take it all in.
Yeah.
Uh, um, the George Washington created the Infantry Corps, and then he created the Chaplain Corps.
Okay.
I always thought that was interesting that they don't seem to go together, but in the military they go hand in hand.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, I have experienced as a chaplain in the military many infantry and other roles to a large degree have to develop their spirituality maybe quicker or think about it at a deeper level than other people. Has what you did or what you do and why, is that something that you've spent a lot of headspace in? Is like, what is the bigger picture and what is this world or my creator, or how it's my purpose and my value in this world?
I think so. Some people, I go to church, but not always. And some people would probably take that the wrong way.
Mm,
To me, a church doesn't have to be a building and a bunch of
right.
people. You can, when you're out in the, say, when you're out in the woods, like when I like to hunt deer, and you go out in the woods and you sit in a stand and you just look around you and you take it in and you take in everything God created. To me, that's church too.
Mm. How do you tie what you believe about who you are or what God created you? This is a heavy question, but uh, um, if you're different, if you're a protector, if you will, quiet, and are able to protect to the degree of one life over another, is there a faith in there that is connected, or do you disconnect who you believe God thinks you are with who you are as infantry?
Um, I think when things are happening, I think it's disconnected.
Oh, okay.
Um,
'Cause
when things settle down, it's a huge connection.
okay.
If you look at, like you said, George Washington made the chaplain corps right after he made the infantry.
Yep.
To me, that makes a lot of sense because the job that we have to do, we have to have a shoulder to lean on.
Mm,
We have to, I mean, I don't know too many people, like you said, uh, there are no um, atheists in a foxhole. It's interesting. My uncle served in Vietnam,
uh-huh.
and I live my life the way uh, other people wouldn't. For instance, um, I believe that when it's your time, it's your time, no matter
Okay.
what you do. And I say that because, like I said, my uncle was in Vietnam. They had a lieutenant over there that was going crazy because, it was the end of his tour. He had like 3 weeks to go before he
Mhm.
got to go home. And a lot of times that's when people get killed. So he made this hut, this sandbag hut that was 2 sandbags thick all around. And he just lived in there.
Oh, to protect himself.
Yeah.
Okay.
And my uncle, who was a Marine Corps infantryman, said they had incoming artillery strike. And after the artillery was over, they looked around to see who their wounded were and who were killed.
Right.
And it seemed like the artillery strike didn't hit a lot of people, but then that lieutenant didn't show up for muster, and somebody went and checked on him, and a little piece of shrapnel had made it through the seam of the
Oh my gosh.
sandbags
Oh.
and killed him. Went right through his head.
Oh.
So that's why I say I
Yeah.
believe when it's your time, it's your time.
So there's forces beyond your control in this world.
Yes.
And so you just have to do what you're designed to do or your personality and do it well
Yeah. Or
and
I do things that um, other people wouldn't.
yeah.
Just try to live freer.
Mhm.
I mean, my
Yeah.
mother-in-law worries about fat grams and eating sugar, and I'm like, no, I'm
You're gonna
60 years old. I'm gonna enjoy myself.
eat what you wanna eat.
Yeah, when it's my
Yeah.
time, it's my time.
Ah, there you go. One of the things we've kinda talked about it a little bit, is infantry kind of on the outside of the perimeter, and you mentioned that. Um, and sometimes that can be really frustrating for family.
Yes.
Yes. And there's that separation piece. So how do you negotiate that? Is there any advice that you would give for an infantry person and a family member?
Well,
You know?
family members just going to have to accept
Mm,
the infantry person as he or she is. Now they have women. Um,
yep.
they're not going to want to. I mean, most people don't want to talk about what happened
Right.
in what they did and what they saw. I mean, one, it's hard to describe unless you've actually done it yourself,
Mm,
and you can't put in all the emotions that you feel when you see and do things like that. I mean,
I've, mm,
when we're young, you think about it. When we're young,
uh-huh.
we're taught that killing is wrong.
Right.
So we have to overcome that, and that's to me. I had psychology in college because I went to college after I got out of the Army.
Okay.
Um, now I forgot where I was going with this.
You're taught to not kill, not
You're taught
harm
to not
another
kill.
human being.
Yes. So you have to overcome that. And then when you overcome it, then you have to live with it.
Right.
And sometimes it's really hard to live with.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to live with, and family just want to see you happy and at peace.
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes I think we think that that's what a spiritual life looks like. It's at peace and joy and all happy. Um, I don't think that that's the full picture, or I've experienced from infantry that that's not the complete picture of a spiritual life. You can carry those burdens with you, but
Well,
is
I like to talk. I talk to God like I'm talking to you right now.
okay.
Um, you know, people look at us as killers, and I guess we are to some extent
Right.
in wartime. Um,
There's a difference.
yes, it's difficult, but if you
Mm,
read in the beginning of the Bible, Joshua was the leader of their infantry,
mm,
and he did a lot of the stuff that we do now. Leading the army, killing, things of that nature, and God still loved him. So, and I
right.
believe that God still loves me.
Right.
But
It's complex, isn't it?
yes,
And for infantry, you've had these complexities of what you're spiritual and who you are to God challenged
yes,
and maybe mulled over. And maybe your spiritual life has changed or evolved with who you are. The innocence is gone.
yeah, I would agree with that. Um, as I've grown, I was in the infantry for 7 years, but just doing those 7 years, as I've grown through there,
Mm. Mhm.
I've learned that not only does God love me, but if I ask him, he'll look after me
Mm.
and he protects me. And I truly believe that. I mean, there's been multiple times things have happened that I shouldn't be here,
Right.
but I am.
Ah,
So the times that has happened, that's made my faith grow.
and then having to come to terms with if it's your time, it's your time. If it's not, it's not. And then
Right,
trust that.
right.
So you just
But
have to
then
trust.
you have to trust and believe. You
Oh,
have to believe.
okay.
And then you have to trust that God will give you what you need and send you to help you go. If you ask him, he'll help you down the path.
Okay.
I mean, I believe God has a path for all of us. Of course, none of us go straight from where we are to him.
Mm.
I mean, my path, if I chronicled my path out, it probably has a lot of curly cues and circles. And
uh, um, you make me think of forgiveness in there, maybe some grace. Um, in the infantry, which is like, is there forgiveness in the infantry? Do you have to forgive yourself? Do you have to forgive one another? Is there
man, you
what?
have hit something that's really tough.
Oh,
Um, at least it is for me.
okay.
Forgiving other people is easy.
Ah,
Forgiving yourself, I still don't know how to do that.
okay.
And it's really rough sometimes.
So there's certain things that you've done as infantry sergeant that you keep of as unforgivable.
You could say that.
Okay. See, it's separate from your day-to-day existence.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. When I'm thinking of like you're a separate group of people in our society. Um, Sometimes we applaud you, sometimes we spit on you. It all depends upon our tone, if you will.
Yep.
Um, Thinking to a large degree, there was a lot of Vietnam vets, if you will, that came back. I have heard many stories from not just infantry, but individuals in the military that when they came back from serving their country and taking orders and doing the things that they had to learn to do that weren't consciously a choice they would have chosen to do. Um, and then learning to live with that hatred or rejection. And now in the 21st century, the military, and I think you might have been a part of this, changing that culture and finding some place in our culture to appreciate or respect that there's a group of people that do the work that is uncomfortable, is unconscionable, that we don't have to necessarily think about.
Well, I'm in the zone between Vietnam
Okay.
and between Iraq and the Gulf Wars.
Kind of what they call the Cold War.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I experienced some of the Vietnam stuff that you're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
but have not experienced a lot of um, the appreciation.
Oh.
I mean, in 2004, that was the first time that my wife was in the U.S. Army band for 20 years, and she's retired. But that was the first time we went to Apple Valley High School, and they had a assembly, and they honored the veterans.
Mm.
Now, this is going to be interesting because the Vietnam vet days, those people were required to go.
The draft.
The
Yeah.
draft.
Yeah.
So I was the beginning of the volunteer.
You chose this.
Yes.
Oh.
And I also feel that there's kind of a pendulum there, that the pendulum goes high. People really like you, like the military people. They
Mm-hmm.
really appreciate you.
Uh-huh.
And then it swings the other way where you're a burden. if we have a time, I don't know what our future holds, but if we have a downtime in the next few years, we may end up back at that. We're a burden
Okay.
and people don't want to have us around.
The military.
Yeah, we're a draw in society. What do you do for us? You
Oh,
know, they don't want you around until the enemy's at the gate.
till they need you.
Right.
Oh, yeah. You brought up and you also brought up, I think it was 1972 or 1973 was the end of the draft, if you will. Conscription ended for the United States of America. And now you join the military, a free choice, if you will.
Right.
You have to choose to do that. Okay. Where before some of the infantry might have not been good infantry, their personalities might have been more challenged by what the infantry requires of you.
Right.
Okay. And which causes even more consternation in your mind, doesn't it?
It can, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Do you find, for you, it sounds like you have a deep private faith that has a deep relationship with God. Does that relationship has that gone out on the front line with you, or you said you kind of pack it away a little bit, and you're just about business? These are things that I have to do.
Um, are you talking about now or then?
I think then, and I'm thinking, maybe I need to preface this. When I was a chaplain, I knew that there was a time for a spiritual practice of grace and mercy, forgiveness, and worship. And then on the front line or in war, there's a different type of relationship one will have with who they believe. Um, there's different levels of who we are, is what I've experienced with our faith. And so worship in God for you on the front line might be something completely different than when you have more headspace.
Yeah, okay, talking about that. Um, m- and maybe you've experienced this being a chaplain. When I was in Korea, um, I was a Catholic at that time, but we might have a Jewish chaplain. We might
Oh, sure.
have a Protestant chaplain. We might have a Catholic chaplain. They're all switch hitters. And
Mm,
there was, and I still have the prayer book somewhere, a non-denominational service
right.
in the military that the chaplains give. Did you experience that?
Uh, well, chaplains recognize that there's something connecting us together that is spiritual. And usually we practice it through a specific faith group, or like, what are those elements of who we are as spiritual beings? And then how do we evidence it as individuals? And
Okay.
that's where the chaplains come in. The difference between a pastor and a chaplain is, who are you ministering to? Who are you spiritually nourishing? And I think you're kind of talking about that a little bit. And so how do you tend to the soul of an individual that doesn't specifically believe what you believe, or an atheist or pagan or Buddhist, or what have you? How do you do that? Because I'm assuming for you in the infantry, you might have a variety of different faith groups or no faith groups whatsoever, but you all came together and were infantry together, and
Yes.
might and practiced what you believed about the world individually and also together, or made space for it.
And we respected one another.
Yeah.
Um, today we talk about anti-Semitism. We talk about um, BLM, that kind of stuff. When I was in the service, the first day of boot camp,
Uh-huh.
you know what bleachers are, right?
That you sit on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, for about an hour, there was an argument between a one. There was a white Southern guy calling a black guy the N word and stuff,
Uh-huh.
and the drill sergeant heard that,
Okay.
and he was right in everybody's face saying, you're not black, you're not white, you're all green.
Oh.
And we had to low crawl on the bleachers for an
Oh.
hour saying that as loud as we could until we
That
got
was
it through our head that, hey, you're all the same. And being in the infantry, you look to your right, you look to your left, those are the people that are going to save your butt.
mm,
So you better respect them
yeah.
because you're going to save them and they're going to save you.
Yeah. In the American Legion, we're coming up, we're talking, and it's the end of January. In February, the beginning of February, February 3rd is for Chaplain's Day.
Yep.
And one of the very reasons that the American Legion and the military continues to recognize the For Chaplains Day is because they were of different faith groups. But when the Dorchester in 1943 was sinking, each four of those chaplains gave up their life jacket to a different individual. So those four chaplains died together,
Mm-hmm.
all having a different faith group. There was a Jew, a Catholic, and then there's two Protestants in there. And so that's something that the military holds as one of its sacred values is we're all humans first and foremost, and we have these common values, and we can express them in specific faiths, and we accommodate that because who you are spiritually connects us together. And those values of courage and compassion, of appreciating the totality, the seriousness of the mission. So infantry, your mission is serious. You've had to have done a lot of consideration of why you're going to do what you're going to do. That extends beyond following orders. And that's your spiritual piece, isn't it? Of appreciating your place and time.
Yes.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're not infantry. You might be something else. Because taking another life is a sacred act in itself. It's on behalf of something other than yourself. Is how
And
I've
it's
understood the infantry.
something you have to live with the rest of your life.
And so you carry that burden.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that isn't information that's privy to just anyone, is kind of what I'm hearing.
Yep. That's true.
Okay. And so for me, as I've not been infantry, I'm not entitled to hear these stories, am I?
Well,
Unless you're going to share them.
I know your background better than most. You served in the trying to think what the place where people go to die,
Hospice?
hospice.
Yeah.
And you served with and you were
Yeah.
with combat arms people, infantry people.
Yeah.
You got to know them. You know who we are.
Yeah.
So you're one of the few outsiders.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
outsiders.
Yes. I always trained the staff that you're not entitled to know anything about a military person unless they want to give it to you. But to a large degree, the things that you carry with you come out sideways, is what we always called in the hospice. What I always called it is they come out sideways. They come out in different behaviors. Everything that as a human being does and they keep within themselves comes out sideways, or it might
Okay.
come out frontal, face frontal. It all depends. But we have to respect one another. And I think the infantry or the United States Armed Forces or anyone in the military has to, since 1973, be willing to consider the added burden that they're mentally going to be carrying. And in today's culture, where do we find those safe places to be who we are now? And how do we live with that? And I know for you and for me, there's also the smaller circles, these places such as the American Legion. And then there's also many other nonprofit veteran-centric organizations where we can kind of be amongst each other, our brethren and our sisterhood, if you will, that
Yeah,
get us a little bit because we're a little different.
that's kind of what we look toward to. I mean, I'm a member of the Disabled Veterans of America, and I was trying to think of the others. I hate it when things slip my mind.
VFW?
The
Are you in the?
VFW, I'm a
Yeah.
member of the VFW, yeah. And then there's a couple other, but yeah, you
Okay.
kind of gravitate towards, even if if there aren't other infantry people there, you still gravitate towards military.
It's part
Because
of your
just,
identity.
yeah,
Yeah.
the
And
Marine
it,
Corps would say, if you're a Marine, you're infantry, because that's the way they train
yeah.
everybody.
Yeah.
The Army, not so much,
Nope.
but World War II, there were instances where they took when they took everybody that was in a town they had to defend, and start handing out rifles to cooks and
Right.
chaplains,
Yep.
and other people that weren't infantry. Guess what, guys? This is what we got to do. So,
The preservation of life and then the taking of life, those heavy, heavy topics that infantry, it's just part of your everyday existence, isn't it?
it is.
And rolling those things back and forth in your mind and in your soul. Private Ryan, I don't know if you ever saw that movie.
Yes, I did.
And there was a part in Saving Private Ryan, and they were, I think, in Germany. And this he was a sharpshooter. He put himself up in a turret, and
Yeah,
he. Do you know the scene that I'm talking about?
Go ahead, keep going.
Well, the part where he asked for forgiveness every time he shot, and
Oh yeah,
his
he was
aim was
a sniper, and every time he fired and
yeah,
killed somebody, he asked for forgiveness.
every time. And I always thought that was a really clear example of the things that the military does. And then he had a really practical, real-time application of staying close to his God, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
and finding that place of recognizing that this world isn't as clean and neat as we want it to be. There are these bumps and these holes that we will find ourselves in, and what do we do with them when we find ourselves up against them? If I could just talk briefly a little bit with you, one of the things that we're struggling with in current culture is the military, current and veterans suiciding. And I don't necessarily connect the role of what the military does with people choosing to end their life, but there could be a connection to that. And because we value our lives, don't we?
We
If
do
we,
to some extent.
okay. And is there anything that you would want to say in regards to that topic? Kind of putting you on the spot, aren't I? Sorry.
You are, and I
I
would
know.
say, don't do it.
Don't do it.
Um, in the same week, I lost a 50-year-old friend and a 25-year-old friend to suicide. I have on my arm, I have the suicide, the semicolon suicide prevention, and then the IGY6, which is I got your 6, I got your back.
Okay.
And I can say twice at Mystic Lake at the casino, twice I've had people come up to me and say, I see what you have written on your arm. I understand what it means. This person over here has been talking about taking their life all night.
Oh.
He's military.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk to him? And twice I've done that.
Yeah.
And one of those times, Carla even kept checking in with him for a couple weeks, just to make sure that things were going okay. Now, we don't know how he's doing today because we haven't connected with him. But
Right.
at least those 2 times we got to talk to somebody. That's something that's near and dear to my heart, is to learn how to deal with that, how to get people to understand what that does to a family.
The after effects.
Yes.
Yeah. Learning to live with burdens in our minds and then finding a place for them, and then not expecting it to always go away, but to minimize. And then in the moment, it sounds like in the moment, you're that hope for that person. Invest in them until they can find their hope and let their mind find these places where the suffering or the despair isn't part of their whole life. Is that accurate?
I think
for
so.
you? Yeah. It's a topic that is front and center for all the organizations that you're involved in that I'm aware of.
Yes.
And it's front and center in our culture. And so I have young kids, and so we talk a lot about that too. But like, what do you do? But for infantry people, they say to a large degree that sometimes that line between life and death is so close, and has been, and you're so familiar that sometimes it's an easier transition into thinking about life without you in it.
Right.
And so I think for us, we need to be really vocal of saying, you might be very familiar with that line, but we really want you to be with us on the life side more so than anything. Yeah. Yeah. Enough for you to put tattoos on your arms.
Yes.
Yes. Because you want other people to know that there's hope.
Yes.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your willingness to talk with me about something as serious as infantry, and a little bit about the United States Armed Forces. Is there anything that you would like to share before we leave today?
Not that I can think of right off the top of my head.
Okay. Well, Joe Tappainer, I appreciate you. We'll close our time today. You and I serve in the American Legion, the Department of Minnesota. We're both 3rd District people, and so we've known each other for quite a few years. And so hopefully this has been informational for the people that are listening to this, and just know that we have infantry, and I know I can be very thankful that there are individuals that do the work that I don't want to think about in a world where I just really want peace. And it would be lovely if we could just have peace, but we know that that hasn't happened yet, has it?
Nope.
No. So I'm going to wish you well today. Thanks.
Thank you.